Hello, everyone, and welcome to Say Hey podcast. It's where we delve into the minds of geniuses. And today we have a special genius with us, all the way from Sydney, New South Wales, Australia. My name is Hassan Yunus.
And my name is Arifa Alonto Yunis. Welcome to our Say Hey podcast. And today our special guest is an author, a connector, a conduit, a fabric artist, and a storyteller. She believes that we are all creative beings and that we can change ourselves and our world for the betterment of all of us. She was born in Athens, Greece in March 1947. Both her parents were Holocaust survivors. Having met in the Auschwitz concentration camp, Nina has lived and worked closely with the Aboriginal people of Australia for almost 40 years. Nina has just won the biggest battle of her life, beating stage 4 lymphoma, blood cancer. It gives us great pleasure to welcome our special guest, Nena Angelo, to our Say Hey podcast.
Thank you, Sarifa. Thank you, Hassan. It's my pleasure to be here with you.
Please tell us a little bit more about your parents.
Well, my mother was a Polish girl. She was 16 years younger than my father. My father was a Greek Jewish man. My mother was a Polish Jewish girl. But neither of my parents were raised in an Orthodox or a religious family. They were Jewish by culture, and my dad, he joined the Socialist Party when he was 11 years old. He was born in Thessaloniki in northern Greece, where there were something like 70,000 Jews who had been kicked out of Spain during the Inquisition 600 years before. So in my father's family, they still spoke the ancient Ladino Spanish. Even when the ancient language had passed in Spain, they still spoke it. And my mum, she was from a family of doctors. Her mother and her father were both doctors, and going back, and her brother was a doctor. And I think my mother wanted to be. She was only 16 when the Nazis came into Poland. And when her mother and all her family were taken on trucks and they were all murdered by the Nazis, my mother had false papers, and so she was on the run her false papers was as a Catholic girl. So she used to go into the churches. She learned a lot about the Catholic faith. She used to question, how Jesus could have been the, Jewish and yet they didn't accept him. She was young and she was vibrant until the day when she was walking down the street with her girlfriend, who was a Catholic girl, and some boys were heading towards her and spat on her and pushed her to the ground and called her a dirty Jew. Now, she'd never experienced that before because she always considered herself a Polish girl, and she didn't understand what had happened. But that was that change in her life where she started questioning and trying to work out her innocence, and her innocent childhood had passed. And she was on the run for many years. In the book, she left us her story. And in my book, Don't Cry, Dance, her story in her voice in the first person tells about that. Eventually, she ended up in Auschwitz. My dad, too, he was a political prisoner. He was actually caught as a political prisoner, as a partisan. And he gave himself over as being Jewish because the political prisoners were being killed. Every time a German or a Nazi was murdered, they'd go and they would kill another, 10 of them. So my father sort of saw the Jewish people in the next compound. He was in jail. and sort of thought, nobody's touching them, but I could be killed any moment. So he handed himself over as being Jewish. And that's when they put him on the cattle trains, and he was taken to the camp as well. My father, though, he was an elite prisoner in Auschwitz. And the reason why was because he was a socialist, and the elite prisoners, which was a commando called the Canada Commando or Canada Commando. They believed Canada was the country of milk and honey, it was a free place. And so this Canada Commando were only socialists. So because he was in the Socialist Party, he passed a couple of exams and he was taken into that barrack. Those particular prisoners were the only ones that were on the platforms when the transport came in with all the people. And their role was to go into the trains and to get everything or anything that they brought with them, because these people thought that they were going to be put somewhere else. So they brought all their money, their diamonds, their gold, food, whatever they could. They didn't know that they were going to put into lines and they were going to be sent to the gas chambers. And because of the role of my father, he could take things that they found and put them in suitcases, and they could bribe the guards. And by bribing the guards, they could get away with a lot. And also, they also had their own bags, and they could then save people as well. So because of that, my father could save people. And I think because they had some food, that's how he met my mother. He saw her there very young, and he offered her some food for lying down on a blanket and a little bit of a hug and, a bit of comfort. And she was traumatized and she refused him. And that was their first and only connection in Auschwitz. They were both taken out separately on their what was called the death marches, where a lot of people, after the Nazis knew that they'd lost the war, the prisoners were just sent out into the forests on these death marches. My father had some food, he managed to survive. My mother, my goodness, I don't know, she just had this strong, strong spirit, and she survived as well, but it's in the book. And one other thing, I didn't know much about my father's story. He never talked about it very much, but about 5 years ago, a friend sent me an email with a link, and I clicked on the link, and there was my dad talking in French. There were 7 hours of interviews in the Holocaust Museum in the United States of America in Washington that I knew nothing about. So I contacted them and they sent them to me, and I sat down and I transcribed them, I translated them, because French was my first language, because my mum and dad only spoke French that they understood between them, and then Greek. We spoke Greek at home. My mother, my Polish mother, learned to speak Greek, and it's all in the book, how they met and how I was born in Athens and then came to Australia.